skills are great, but actually a lot of it is trying to find their personal character. And that could be about the films they watch, the books they read, the company they keep, how they spend their time at the weekends. Now, it's in their discretion to share how much they'd like to share of their personal lives, but that actually gives a shape of the type of person they are. In the travel industry, what I see visually come out, which we are trying to reshape in what we do, is here's a picture of a giraffe, here's a picture of the Jeep, here's a picture of the lodge, here's the picture of the copper bathtub. It's a very literal visual translation. Go in Kenya and enjoy it. I'm more interested in saying, no, where are the storytellers in your journey? The drivers, the guides, the cooks, the conservation leader. And again, it's more of that conceptual approach, emotive approach.
Hello, and welcome to the Travel Growth Podcast. I'm Tom McLaughlin, founder of North9, and this is where I speak to successful travel business leaders and dig into the successes, challenges, and learnings from their experiences over the years, so you, the listener, can take away actionable advice to improve your own businesses and maybe even lives too. My guest today is Duncan Grossart, a zoologist, a veteran entrepreneur, and a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society, who's dedicated the second half of his career to the radical restoration of our planet. As the founder of Journeys with Purpose, he's created a B Corp powerhouse that doesn't just offer trips, but facilitates deep dive think tanks in the wild. Duncan has built a business at the forefront of impact in travel, and he has a fascinating background that's led up to doing that as well. We get into his roots in commercial media and span into his work rewilding landscapes with the European Nature Trust, and he's pioneered a model where travel serves as a direct catalyst for ecological recovery. He's here to show that purpose isn't just a marketing buzzword, it's the most resilient business strategy that we have. We get into all sorts in our discussion, from the personal shift of moving from profit first to purpose first, to the marketing challenges of selling an experience based on impact rather than just luxury, and why the future of travel growth depends on our ability to rewild the world. Duncan's also incredibly open about his personal motivations, how he approaches leadership, and the role of personal experiences in shaping professional paths. This is a fabulous conversation. I played very little part in it. Duncan has so much useful information to share. And yeah, when we went through it, I thought it would be the perfect place to finish off this season of the podcast. So I'll let you all enjoy it. Here's me chatting to the wonderful Duncan Grossart. Duncan, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I have been really looking forward to this because I know a lot about what you've done in the past and with the business, with Journeys with Purpose, and there are lots of fabulous things in there that I'm excited to explore a bit further and share with other people. So thank you for taking the time.
Well, likewise, Tom. Similarly, I hugely enjoy following your progress and what you're doing, and congratulations. So looking forward to speaking with you today.
Fab. Well, listen, to get started, I tend to go back to the beginning with people to kick off. So as I said, I think you have a bit of a journey before Journeys with Purpose began. So why don't you take us back to the beginning and kind of maybe tell us how the seed was sown for this and what happened in the build up to starting the business?
Certainly. I will give you a summary of my background and how it shaped my life and informs what I do now. So I'm a Brit, born in the south of England. And I was lucky enough to grow up in a household where my parents, and my mother in particular, really encouraged a nature, a natural outlook, if you like. So we had, as I grew up, a plethora of animals around us in our garden. So it was a bit like an aspect of the Good Life series from the 1970s and 1980s. We had bantams and ducks and tortoises and dogs and so on, and also a couple of ponies in a field locally. And so that very much informed me or shaped my relationship with other uh, other life, if you like. And I hugely enjoyed it. I was really taken by the series that David Attenborough, the programs that he was producing. Life on Earth came out at the end of the 1970s. I was also transfixed by the likes of Jacques Cousteau. And in fact, my first pet was called Calypso after Jacques Cousteau's research vessel. And so that was really my early years, my very early years when I was a child, and a real joy of nature and the natural world. I was also lucky enough to begin traveling from what was, I suppose, quite an early age, long haul. So as a 15-year-old in 1985, I traveled to Kenya with my older sister. And having grown up with ponies and then horses, we were quite involved in the horse world. And so my sister had developed some relationships in Kenya where she was working with some of the local families, schooling horses, working with horses and so on. And I went out with her in the summer of 1985. And that was my first, if you like, exposure to the world outside of Europe. And of course, back in the mid-80s, the world was very different in terms of its accessibility around to different countries around the world. The sort of, if you like, the Western world was really about North America, about Europe, and a lot of other countries around the world were closed off. It was a very different world in, say, Eastern Europe with the Iron Curtain, in China, and so on and so forth. So when I look back on it, I feel very lucky to have done long haul travel. I traveled back to Africa in the 80s, to Zimbabwe and Zambia, and I also went on a school trip to Ladakh in India in 1888, which was really a remarkable trip. And I'm very fortunate, and I want to come back to this as we go through the podcast, having just come back from Ladakh last month to go in the search of snow leopards and wolves and lynx and so on. So that combination of relationships with other sentient life, other animal life, horses in particular for me, and then travel really shaped my early years. I studied zoology at university in London. I also remarkably did a master's degree on equine science as well. And I say remarkable because I found school very difficult. I was an undiagnosed dyslexic. And so I was the younger of my brother and my sister, and I think the most troublesome to my parents in terms of, finding my feet at school. And I only learned to learn really when I was at university and under enormous pressure to try and pull the rabbit out of the hat with exam results. And now that I've learned how to learn, I enormously enjoy it. So those were my early years, and that's what shaped me.
Yeah, amazing. There's definitely some interesting experiences that could take us off on a few tangents there. I think I'll try and stay on track with what I had in mind initially, which was because things like the dyslexia, learning how to learn, I will certainly pin and come back to that. You had that experience, but then you left uni and went into what kind of the traditional life, I guess, got a job and then ended up starting a business, a kind of photo media business. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that making that next step and doing that.
Yeah. So I finished my academic career, and my professional career has really been over two parts since then. You're right. I went to London. I'd always, I think, and it was because I had seen much other aspects of the world. I'd seen scales of different diversity, different geographies, different wealth, that I was also interested in business. And I think the potency of what business and money could do, what energy it could provide to achieving certain goals in life. So I finished my degrees. I went to London. The first part of my early years were working for a couple of companies, which I enjoyed and were informative, but they weren't really what was motivating for me. I'd also, through my 20s, followed the world of photography because being dyslexic, text has never been my strong point. I actually, ironically, enjoy the written word. I love reading, but it's not necessarily, it's quite slow process, but I love sitting down and reading a book. But my way of reading the world is much more through visuals, and they can both be stills and they can be film as well. And it's that storytelling that I found easy to absorb and engage with. And again, we'll come back to that as to how it informs how we approach Journey to a Purpose. And so, yes, through my journey into discovering photography and so on, I met people and had a photography agency that became, and this was in the late, when my late 20s, early 30s, became quite successful. So we ended up with offices in London, in Europe, North America, and international partners all around the world. And it taught me a lot about the creative industries. It taught me a lot about technology changes, because when I first started in the industry, we were still working with transparencies rather than digital files. And it taught me a lot about international business. And in addition to the offices, as I say, we had international partners all around the world. So I was traveling a lot. It also taught me a lot about how little I knew about business, because I was not a business graduate. This was someone who had a lot of energy, enthusiasm, but I didn't know about organizational structure, design, scaling, and so on like that. So I was determined to reignite how I'd learned to enjoy learning by going back to school in a way. So I went to places like Cranfield. I joined some business networks, of which I still engage with on the large business network scale. And that really enabled me to understand how to scale a business, how to go beyond the span of control of one person, which is typically 20 to 30 people. So it's about organizational design, it's about leadership, it's about delegation, strategy, all these different things in the world of business, which I enormously enjoyed. So that was the first part of my career, which lasted about 15 years, I would say.
Well,
And I exited that business about 15 years ago.
okay. Can you go into a little bit more detail around those learnings? So you kind of listed off a variety of, I guess, headlines there: organizational design, team building,
Yeah.
all those kind of things. Yeah. What were there standout things that you took from that experience, or that you learnt from being in those networks and peers and things like that?
I'll certainly share them. I don't believe there's anything revelatory about what I learned. They are in a way, the obvious tenets that we all know as business owners, people that run businesses, is that at the end of the day, it's all about people. So my task, actually, my number one task, if I had only one thing to do, is to find and work with the very best people that I possibly can. Period. As long as I can articulate, shape a clear vision, a clear headline plan about where we want to go, what we want to achieve. After that, it's about finding the brilliant people. And what shapes a brilliant person? It's clearly it's about technical ability and technical skills. But as we know, it's more about the values that we share and the kind of the drive to work towards a shared goal, and quite frankly, a will to win. It's what you and I have talked a little bit about football. It's what Jurgen Klopp said about how he looks for players. He said, I don't necessarily look talent's great, but it's about effort and application. And that is what counts first and foremost. So it's about people at the end of the day.
As a quick side note on that, my friends still take the mick out of me from when we were maybe 14 playing air hockey at the bowling alley, and I said those words. I said, "You've got to have the will to win," and that was playing air hockey in the bowling alley. So I can, I can empathise with that feeling.
Do you know, and thanks for sharing that. I hear it over and over again. And I think once one gets to a place where one loves to learn, it's never ending. So I'm always looking for sources of inspiration. I'm always looking for people that I can listen to and learn things from, even if it is just hearing the message again. So one of those that I've heard through to the very upper echelons of business success, commercial success, impact success is perseverance and determination. It is absolutely the key thing for success is never giving up. Because one thing that we can absolutely guarantee is things are not going to go to plan and things are going to go wrong. And how do we pivot out of that to find our way back to the North Star that guides us, to the place where we want to get to? So if there's one message I can share with everyone is you can guarantee that things are going to go wrong. So we better be tooled up in terms of the values that we share, the intent that we share, and how we're going to get through those obstacles. And when we do, it's even more rewarding than the successes.
How do you find people who have that? So you've grown a team of people.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something when you're interviewing or hiring that you do to identify that thing?
I would say it's definitely a two phases to it, or two aspects to it, I should say. One is experience. Experience really does help. The more one goes through the process of working with people and recruiting people, experience really helps in understanding how you can shape questions, how you can listen to the answers coming through. So, but that is all founded on the second aspect is working on a process of recruitment. So, one would start with, okay, first we've got to have a job brief. So if you want to hire a sales executive, I think too many of us, and I've done it in the past, is you say, I want a sales executive. There's not even a strong enough brief on what is the expectation of the company for that role to achieve in terms of the skills required, the targets required, but also as well, the behaviors one expects as well, the shared values, the culture, and so on like that. And I think, that is one thing. And then there is the process of recruitment and interviewing. And actually, I would encourage everyone to study best practice out there and get down on paper what are your phases of recruitment in terms of the questions that are asked, the people that in your own team that person would in turn meet and have a conversation with. The more rigorous one can be with a recruitment process and being disciplined about the recruitment process, the better chance of having the right person come on board into the team. And it's a win-win. I'm not in the business of wasting other people's time either. It's unfair of me not to be wholly rigorous with recruitment, because if somebody comes on that doesn't quite fit, then it's not fair on them. They won't have achieved what they want to achieve over a period of time.
Any magic questions or particular things you look out for on a CV or anything like that makes you think they've got the will to win?
I think skills are great, but actually a lot of it is trying to find their personal character. And that could be about the films they watch, the books they read, the company they keep, how they spend their time at the weekends. Now it's in their discretion to share how much they'd like to share of their personal lives, but that actually gives a shape of the type of person they are. Skills can be taught. We know all this, Tom. It's about those core characteristics. Do they play in sports teams? Are they the captain of a sports team? Let's find that out.
I think it's underestimated, probably particularly by candidates, what an impact that kind of information can have in the process. They maybe get bogged down in, like you say, experience and skills and previous roles and things like that. And I've certainly placed a lot of weight on CVs when they've come through that have had screenshots of the 3 most recent books that I've read, or those kind of things, and being like, oh,
Yeah.
well, if you're reading those things, then you're the right kind of person to join this team.
Exactly. So you asked me the question about other aspects of business. I just want to make sure I did answer the question as well as I can within the time we have available. About people, first and foremost, I did mention as well, a strong and articulated vision about where we're going with this, and make it exciting as well. And then have a plan and a management process. And that plan is covering the disciplines of a business, the strategy of a business. What are the key decisions that we need to make in a period that the plan relates to? And then the management plan, how are we going to execute on those decisions? So it's a real combination of and I'm in favor of leading with the heart versus leading with the head, and we can explore that a little bit further. But it's bringing an exciting vision to life, but then deploying the head to execute on it and hit those targets. Because success in itself is very energizing. We all know when we hit targets, exceed targets, life is fun, life is good. When we're struggling, it's tough or tougher. So it's the emotion and it's the rigor as well.
Yeah. Are there any of those things that you've found particularly difficult or had to work on the most, even when you sort of logically know what they are?
It's a really good question. 2 things that I am constantly aware of is time with the team. I almost feel like you can never spend too much time with the team and communicating amongst oneself to continue to sort of relay the messages about what's important here, what are the values here, what are the targets we're going for here. So even when we're working remotely, I think good communication amongst the team is really paramount. So I know when I've done it badly, and it shows up, quite frankly. And this is about you and I having an honest conversation. And I think when we really invest in communicating with one another, it bears good results. The other thing is about, I think, the execution is difficult. Planning is kind of easy in a way because it's sort of theoretical. No plan actually is delivered. There's always some variation on it. And I think it's being very wary of the phrase planning in lieu of action. Always be action orientated. So it's again, it's getting that balance right between a dedicated time, carving out without the emails on, without the phone on, to do the plan inside one's own head and on paper to make it explicit, and then with your senior team and then across the team. But then hold oneself first and foremost accountable and responsible for execution, and the team members around you as well.
Yes. And that is easier said than done, isn't it? That is
Totally. I mean, I'll throw it back to you, Tom. I mean, this is a two-way conversation. I know you're asking me questions, but what about your own experience? Does that resonate with you? What do you have to add?
It really does, yeah. I think that exact point that you said there is a very pertinent one that we're talking about in our team at the moment, the accountability and responsibility side of things, where you can have an amazing group of people together who are aligned and motivated and talented. But, we've sort of well publicized. I've talked a lot about how we've structured the business and organized it in a relatively flat way, not a hierarchical sense, but sort of focused on autonomy for individuals and giving people the responsibility for their roles. But I think the thing you miss from that is accountability. That, like you meant, there's a bit of a risk of a gap there. I think that's this whole experience for me over the years as we've grown, is you sort of focus in one area and build it and think you've done a really good job with it. And then there's a sort of unintended consequence of doing something that way, and that's working really well, the way that you plan to do that thing. But then suddenly, it's whack-a-mole, isn't it? Something else pops up and you're like, right, I've got to go and address that new thing. So
Yeah.
knowing, I think just being fluid with it is probably the thing I've learned, that like you say, you're never going to reach perfection. You're never going to get to an end point. It's kind of, there's always going to be something that you need to deal with. But my chief challenge is probably coming from a freelance individual background, as someone who has always sort of done the work originally, becoming a sort of getting to know the new role of someone who sets out the vision and then leaves people to go and execute on that thing, and not return and keep my claws in and sort of hover over shoulders and things like that. So, I'm still learning, still trying on that one.
It's tough. It's tough because starting a business or being in a young business, whether you're the owner or the or a team member in a small business, it is tough. One of the things I learned through one of my courses I went on, and I can't remember all the 4 phases, but it was they describe it as the 4 phases of what it is to be a business owner or a business leader. And it starts with what they describe as the engineer. It's the guy sitting in the shed making the product, and he builds a product, he goes out and sells it, comes back to the shed, builds another one, repeat, repeat, repeat. A lot of people get stuck in that phase. The second phase I can't quite remember. Forgive me. The third is what they call the hero leader. Is it's where one's not prepared to let go. One still wants to come into the office and say, "Don't worry, everyone. I'm here. I can fix it all," and get that emotional rush of being, the center of gravity for the whole thing, being the founder and everything else like that. The fourth place is which we all want to get to as business owners, and I will also relate it to the team that works with us, is the strategist. It's the classic working on the business, not in the business. And how do we get there? Because it's more enjoyable for leadership and the leadership team, but it's actually more enjoyable for the rest of the team as well. I truly believe people don't really want to be told what to do. We certainly recruit for self-starters. People are going to take the initiative, take the ball and run with it. We know the vision. I love people that want to, it's entrepreneurs within the company, if you like. And that follows on from, we have conservation partners around the world, brilliant people. That's my big reward in this business, is I get to spend time with brilliant people who inspire me beyond belief. One of those is Tompkins Conservation, led by Chris Tompkins and founded by herself and her late husband, Doug Tompkins. And Doug Tompkins said, commit and then figure it out. Get up in the morning, decide what you're going to do, and then go for it. And a part of it is about figuring it out. And so going back to that comment about finding people who like taking responsibility, who like being autonomous, but also relish working in a team, because we all know that 1 and 1 can equal 3, 4, 5, and 10 and 20 can equal 50 and 100 and so on like that. That's when the magic happens. And the thing that I've always been most proud of is not the numbers in a business. It's about the team that we build. And when that begins to flow and have harmony in it, and you can feel that emotional energy running strongly.
Yeah, I absolutely can vouch for that as well. Let me take it back to connect the next steps from, you said you exited the media photo business.
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell us about why you did that and chose to do that, and how that flowed into setting up Journeys with Purpose.
Okay, so I'd always had in my mind, and it was a sort of a tug or a burn that became stronger, that by the time I was 40, I wanted to go back to my roots in environmental causes, sustainability, the natural world. I really didn't know what that would mean, but that was the ambition, is to say, okay, I've achieved this by this date, and I want to then look at the next phase of my life. And so that's what I achieved. It wasn't necessarily exactly the way or the timing that I'd envisaged, but these things never are. But that was the reason why I exited the business, is because I wanted to move, if you like, into the next phase. And it was around those topics that meant so much to me. And throughout all the years, I kept up relationships with certain conservation organizations, certain travel organizations. So I was sort of keeping that tempo going of briefing myself on what was going on in the natural world, conservation, sustainability, environmental causes, and so on. But I honestly say it took me not a matter of months, but a matter of a few years to truly find my feet in what I wanted to do. And, what is the lesson from that is we all, I think, have to keep putting our foot forward in the morning to find enjoyment with what we're working on. If we're not satisfied with where we've landed, is just to keep going. We all know what Churchill said. If you're going through tough times or going through times you don't want, you just keep going, and you just need to keep marching on. And the trigger point for me was about 10 years ago, and I started hearing these stories of rewilding. So I mentioned Doug and Chris Tompkins, and others. I mean, that's really kind of my key origin story of what they've achieved over a 30-year period in Chile and Argentina. 15 million acres of large national parks, 30 million acres terrestrially, and 30 million acres of marine reserves. And I was fascinated by the entire story of how Doug, being the founder of the North Face clothing in the 1960s, sold out of that, did a kind of a 60s road trip journey down from California down to Chile with one of his mates, Yvon Chouinard of Patagonia, and 3 or 4 other guys, and climbed Fitzroy in Chile, which is the outline of the Patagonia logo. But then Doug came back with his first wife, started Esprit, which is a huge retail success in particularly North America in the 1980s. And how you could take that immense corporate entrepreneurship and success, and how they pivoted it and turned it into incredible conservation and impact success to a 10x of what they'd have achieved in the corporate world. And why did he do that? It was that journey, a parallel journey of the corporate world, and at the same time still spending time with his friend Yvon Chouinard and other people, mountaineering, climbing, skiing, kayaking, and seeing this erosion of the natural world, and saying, enough's enough. I can't continue to do what I do when my priorities lie elsewhere. And so, he sadly died in a kayaking accident 10 years ago, Doug, but Chris and her teams in Chile and Argentina have just done amazing work. This, for me personally, was profoundly inspiring. And how could you take corporate entrepreneurship and turn it into impact entrepreneurship? And so this is what really led me then into say, okay, I want to learn a lot more about rewilding. I want to understand who else out there is doing this work across the Americas, North and South, across Europe, Africa, Asia, Australasia, and so on and so forth. And we both know there's been an enormous explosion in this realm of rewilding over the last 10 years, and in particular over the last 5 years. It's a term that was coined just as recent as the 1990s, so it's probably only 30 years old, but it's really accelerated over the past 5 years. And fundamentally, it's about, I would say, a supplement to traditional conservation, which is about protecting what we have left, versus rewilding, which is about saying, no, we want to restore what we've lost as well. Not necessarily directly, because some of the animals that have gone from large landscapes have become extinct and so on. But it's looking at it in large landscape scale, seascape scale, magnitude. And again, it's working at scale. It's having ambition to look after these brilliant, beautiful landscapes and seascapes.
Feed that into, I guess, give us the headlines then for anyone who doesn't know as what Journeys with Purpose does, and okay, I guess how you've taken that and are applying it now to what you do.
Yeah. Okay. So fascinated by rewilding, working at scale, aligns with a 30 by 30, and I became involved in events and media and fundraisings and so on like that, which I enormously enjoyed. It's contributing towards large scale, a large scale restoration. And I'll explain as well why I think rewilding is so important and ecosystem restoration. I mean, I know there are a lot of fans out there as well, but just to sort of set some scenes. But on the specific question around journeys with purpose, I said to myself, okay, dig deep, Duncan. What has helped motivate and shape my life? And when I think back on it, it was my own relationship with the natural world, particularly horses, and it was travel at an early age. I'm lucky enough, you're lucky enough to have done some exceptional travel around the world, and how that is the best classroom for us all to learn, appreciate, feel gratitude for the life around us, for the natural world, for the cultures that we spend time in, um, and to really give us a deeper understanding of what's important in life. And I find them personally emotional. And so I said to myself, I'm not going to overthink this. I'm going to lead with my heart. Let's try and see if we can put some journeys together with these amazing conservation experts around the world. So that's the birth of Journeys with Purpose, is to say, okay, we are going to create experiences in the wild with some of the world's leading rewilding and community-based leaders and their teams and local communities. And the audience that we're going to target are people who can contribute to those successes. So yes, we do work with donors and philanthropists and high net worth individuals to get them engaged with how they can contribute in the success of these projects. And it's not just about people with disposable funds. It's also about people who have levers to pull in industry, in commerce, or who have big audiences. People in media. We know probably the most famous of them all is Leonardo DiCaprio, who is an advocate for the environment. His voice carries an immense power. So it's looking about levers, whether they are financial or otherwise. That is, again, that's the birth of JWP. Is to mobilize resources to create action on the ground.
And you started at the perfect time for a new travel company in 2019, didn't you? Tell us, so now we're in 2026. What does it look like at the moment? How big's the team? Kind of where have you got to over that time? Just as a quick, so people know what we're dealing with. Yeah,
you're quite right, Tom, in terms of setting up businesses. And again, this is a lesson for us all. We all have plans in life. Just wait till they hit reality. So I incorporated the business in December 2019. And of course, COVID's just around the corner. And I honestly think actually it was great for timing. I mean, it was, it was tragic in many other ways. But the benefit that it gave me is I didn't have a travel business to take apart, and I have friends in travel and they had a really tough time. Thankfully, they have really bounced back really well. So I could focus my attention on networking, researching, honing what I wanted to do, because I could call anyone in the world for 2 years and they were sitting at their desk. And so the ability to create the architecture of the relationships. So I'm very lucky. I either know everyone in rewilding at the top of the table, or I'm half a degree away. It's a wonderful place to be in. But that was a very dedicated. I mean, it sounds like it might have come easily. No, I know. Developing a business is incredibly hard work. So it was real dedication to creating that. I was also, in a way, did I have the benefit? I had perhaps the benefit to some degrees. I'm not coming from the travel industry. I have no predefined understanding of how I should approach this. So in terms of creating the offer, traditionally travel would call a DMC or a lodge or a hotel. I didn't call any of these people. I was calling conservation organizations and saying, hey, can we do a trip? Like with Chris, so our first trip was with Chris's team in Argentina. Can we do a trip? That was what it was led by. And then I go and figure out how we put the logistics together. And so first 2 years, creating the business plan, relationships and everything else like that. So the past 4 years have been a combination of building out what we describe as our hosted journeys, our flagship journeys with conservation leaders. The first being in 22 with Chris's team in Argentina, in Ibero, the national park they created out there in northeastern Argentina and Corrientes. And then our private journeys as well. So those are more the tailor-mades, the FITs and so on like that. And the arc of the past 4 years has been really exciting, really demanding, and really rewarding as well, is to see an idea come to fruition, bring people onto the team. So we're about a dozen now in the team. So it's still a small team, but to see team members also get insights into areas of the world, because a lot of them have come from travel, that they weren't aware of. So we did a lot of fam trips last year to Chile and Patagonia with Rewilding Chile, to Africa, to North America, and seeing, I think, amongst them, my team members, areas of the world, as I say, they haven't seen before, but also talking to some of these change makers that are operating around the world is a real reward in of itself. So I'm trying to think, what's the journey been? It's been the journey for us all of learning, developing relationships, bringing guests into the field. And of course, that's the other side of the coin, is when we get the feedback from guests saying, wow, you're thinking about travel differently here. This is not, because yes, we are dealing generally with high net worths, ultra high net worths, is you're not enacting you're not going after status style travel. I said, no, we're not. We are trying to make sure we find you the very best accommodation, the very best partners on the ground, because that's the service we're providing. But it's not about status style travel. It's about learning experience, it's about immersive experiences. It's about intelligent travel and meaningful experiences.
How do you balance the needs and wants of the, I guess, sustainability aspect in its traditional sense of environment, communities, and so on, with commercial sustainability that is, we need a business which is operating profitably and doing well and looking after the team and stakeholders in a financial sense? Because obviously when you talk about the business, you've got the people, projects, places, how those things are laid out. But if there's no money, it kind of falls to pieces, right? So how do you think about that when you're looking at those things?
Okay, so the term that we use inside the business is commercial success drives impact success. Yes, if we don't have people traveling with us, we can't contribute in the way we want to with regards to impact. How do we contribute with impact? So we're members of 1% for the planet. So 1% of our top line revenues goes to good causes. And we will choose typically one that we lead with and then 3 or 4 others that we can contribute to. So that's for all travel in the company. For the hosted journeys, the flagship journeys, which are set departures with the conservation leader, we will also incorporate a donation element into the trip price. Number 2. Number 3, we of course obviously encourage discretionary donations as well. So when people visit these places, they visit these projects, we want them to reach in deeper where they can. We don't prescribe that. We want it to occur naturally. We want it to be emotive. Or they can go and do something in their own realm. So they can go and, put endeavors towards, their own work if they're engaged in rewilding or conservation work or community work themselves. So that's how we approach the impact side. As I've said, we need people to travel with us. So to grow our impact, if you like. And it's a deployment of resources, but it's also the advocacy as people learn through experiences, they can spread it into their networks, and it's to think differently. And of course, a lot of the world of rewilding and getting into rewilding is not just the practice of restoring ecosystems, but it's enabling us to think differently about what we want our natural world to be like around us. What do we want green and pleasant England to look like? How, and so on like that. So it's about the advocacy and so on. But commercial success drives impact success. So yes, we want to continue to encourage people to travel with us. That's, if you like, the reconciliation. Where I think this might land is like, say, well, how can you justify flight travel and so on like that? And that's an answer I can't give a solvable, well, that's a question I can't give a solvable answer to. That's still a knot that we can't solve. My preference to providing impact is to invest in teams doing good work on the ground directly that we know and we have a relationship with, and we have criteria on our website about who we're back. And, one of those is good governance, rather than, say, just writing off as paying the check and doing carbon credits.
How do you think the industry is doing on this front, as someone who is well immersed and obviously speaks to a lot of leaders and people on the ground doing amazing things like you've listed already? As a sector, how do you think travel is doing? What are they doing well? What could we do better?
Who am I to judge the travel industry? I'll be very honest with you, Tom. I don't spend a great deal of time looking at the travel industry. I don't want to be sitting in my seat criticizing others. I spend so much of my time and energy with my team on a devotion to working on where we believe we can make impact. I can make opinion and commentary is that it's one of the world's largest industries, if not the world's largest industry at $12 trillion or whatever it is, $15 trillion. And it floats across so much of how we interact with travel and hospitality as well, is that I think it very much depends on the owner. If you have a financially driven owner, that's how the company will behave. What I do see is that there is a much stronger appetite for more meaningful experiences. And I pretty much from when I set up JWP, this was part of the language, but it's really coming on strong now. So the idea about a softer footprint, and more of a contribution is coming through much more strongly now. Those guys that are out there that are doing, very evident greenwashing, fine or not fine, very much not fine. What me and others, we want to be the inspiration about saying, let's not encourage necessarily the industry to change behaviors en masse. Let's try and inform the customer that there's a much more exciting, wonderful, meaningful way to travel, because then that will have a bigger impact, I think, on the industry. Because if people walk away from pretty plain vanilla, very much how much money can we make and put it in a bank account in Geneva, hopefully that will change their behaviors as well.
Yeah, I think, like you say, if obviously in many instances, companies are led by the financial incentives. So I guess the way to change behavior is to change customer behavior so that the financial incentives are driven by the action, the more positive action. I guess tying into this, you've set the business up, and then it's in, when you're saying I don't pay much attention to the travel industry, but then you roll up and you're the highest scoring B Corp travel company. What have you learned or taken as you become more immersed and obviously set trips up and run trips and understood that thing better when it wasn't the starting point for you? Is there anything that you've taken from it that's like, oh, this is something we've done particularly differently that has worked really well? Or and that might tie into the B Corp stuff. It might not. I'm interested just to hear if you've got any guidance on that that's led to the results and the awards that you've got from that. But yeah, you've obviously got a slightly different perspective, as you said, than people who are in travel and then set up a business and kind of just do it in the same way that's always been done.
Again, it's okay. So how have we done this differently without sort of like, if you like, I don't have any historical templates to work off. Is how we all run our business is very personal as well. What I've always enjoyed personally about traveling is actually diving into people and cultures, and it's a lot part of my upbringing with my parents. Is I was very lucky. I didn't experience any prejudice as I was growing up in a white middle class family. My parents' view was, are they a good person or not a good person? What's the quality of their character? And it was also the attitude. It was, and for me, I don't care whether you're the king or the cleaner, you get treated in the same way, with good grace, good manners, courtesy. And so that has enabled me to always dive in to cultures and people and just be fascinated by whatever they're doing, cooking or guiding or looking after the ponies in the field, or the horses we're doing a trek with or something like that. So we've always put people at the heart of what we've done. It's really key for me is that people at the heart. So we talk about nature conservation, rewilding, biodiversity, predator introductions and all like that, but it's all about people. And so from my background in photography, I was working in commercial photography. So broadly speaking, in terms of photography as a business, there are two types. There's commercial photography, which is related to advertising. And then there's editorial photography, celebrity, sports, news, and so on. Commercial photography is based on emotive images that mean something, that translate into conceptual words. So you're looking at, what does that image mean? Is it about love? Is it about family? Is it about togetherness? Is it about conflict? Rather than a literal translation of, in the travel industry, what I see visually come out, which we are trying to reshape in what we do, is here's a picture of a giraffe, here's a picture of the Jeep, here's the picture of the lodge, here's the picture of the copper bathtub. It's a very literal visual translation. Go in Kenya and enjoy it. I'm more interested in saying, no, where are the storytellers in your journey? The drivers, the guides, the cooks, the conservation leader. And again, it's more of that conceptual approach, emotive approach. And we clearly have to work on the fact that those other items are as given as we can possibly make them. But it comes back to storytelling. I personally want to be on a journey that's a story that unfolds in front of me. And that more lyrical, that more engagement with people along the path, I found a wonderful expression of travel. And I believe a few other people do as well. So that's what we do.
Storytelling is one of those topics that comes up over and over again, isn't it? And how humans kind of react to that thing, and that we are kind of storytelling creatures. And I think whether it's, certainly from a marketing point of view, I think it's incredibly effective. And I'm, starting to connect the dots now between that historical experience and business one and how that's fed into how you've done this and set it up is, it's interesting to hear that evolution. I guess it ties in a little bit to what you've said a couple of times, the heart-led person rather than head-led person. And you've used the phrase feeling your way forward. But I'm also hearing you talk about a lot being very informed as well, listening to lots of people, networking, courses, all those things. What do you mean by being a heart-led person? And have you got any examples where you've maybe gone in that direction where your head's said the other?
I think certainly in my early part of my career, it was head driven. It's like, okay, how do I need to get my career underway here, and think much more logically. And I can't express as well how we will all go through phases in our own lives in our own unique ways. And so my story is my story. People will approach their lives in different ways. And I think at times in your life, things will land at that appropriate time, if you like. So what I do now, perhaps I could have done in my early 20s, but certainly that more logical approach, that more structured approach to my career has given me the springboard or the leverage to be more heart-led, if you like. Building the experience around actually what is it to structure and design a company, and go through all the different aspects of what it is to run a company, in sales, marketing, finance, operations, CRMs, and everything else like that. So that foundation has served me very well. In terms of the hard aspect is that, again, it's one of those things that's come back to me over and over again through mentors, and that I've had in my life is love what you do. Life rattles by incredibly quickly, and you've got to love what you do. So there's nothing wrong with being emotionally engaged with what you're working on. And so that's what I mean about, if you like, being heart-led, is try and sort of reflect in, dig in. It's what I did, and said, what's important to me? What's my place in the team here as well? And what I mean by team, let's look at the rewilding nature conservation sort of world, is that people are doing brilliant things in their own brilliant way. They might be in the field doing this. They might be a fundraiser. I just thought more of my A game is creating experiences, creating travel experiences. And so let's do something I love. Let's try and make sure I fit in the scheme of things. So I'm making a proper contribution that has impact, rather than doing something that is, I love, but has no impact, if you like. And that's what I pursued, and as we said, it's, not every week is a bed of roses. There are weeks when it's tough, to sort of work through a particular project or obstacle or challenge that one has. But if you love it and you have the shared values, that's what will take you through to the other side.
If I can keep going philosophical with it, what do you view as success? You've been through what sounds like commercial success, maybe in business one, in traditional business world. How do you view that thing now as you're in this phase?
So undoubtedly, direct, tangible outcomes. So, I've given the example of Duncan Grossart. These are impact metrics of landscapes, seascapes protected, of which communities are the direct beneficiaries as well. These are creating nature-based economies in the rural world, bringing people back into the wild. And again, I got to emphasize this, is rewilding is actually bringing people back into wild places. So having measurable outcomes in that regard, that's what's important to me. And I think the second thing is about enabling the success of others. it's as simple and as complicated as that. I love seeing people work together, succeed as a team, but succeed for themselves as well. So one of the things that you and I have discussed in the past that we really work on is youth, diversity, and female leadership and representation, both in the causes we support and the guests that we encourage to participate. And, you know, I grew up with strong women in my life, my mother, my sister. And I don't understand when people resist an equitable working world and socially just environment. I just don't understand it. You know, we all have this brilliant and wonderful contribution to make. So I absolutely want to be somebody that improves and encourages and gives opportunity to young people, to people from whatever background they are in the world, faith, whatever, doesn't matter. And to women as well. You know, I honestly think the world will be a better place if we had more female voices in positions of leadership, honestly. So that's what's important to me, is to give brilliant people an opportunity to step forward, have a voice, and make a positive difference in the world.
As a man with 2 daughters, I can echo that very much and hope that that trend continues. I agree. Like you say, lots of different perspectives and skill sets
Yeah.
and ways of doing things. You know, the more you experience and different people you work with, you know, you see the different aspects that come from that. So yeah,
It's lovely to hear, Tom. You know, I've got a 16-year-old daughter and a almost 18-year-old son, and you know, these are our great treasures in our lives, our children. And I also want to add on as well. It's not, you know, I'm I'm a traditional guy as well. I believe in you know, the qualities of manhood, if you like, and men being strong. But I think we have to sort of reflect on what it is to be a strong man. And you know, it's often not about muscle and, you know, puff. It's about, you know, the integrity and the values and the strength that we show in different ways. And sometimes that is, you know, what the French call la force tranquille, you know, that quiet strength. So it's not about abdication of being a man. I think it's about that equitable environment where good people have a voice.
what do you believe are the qualities that you have that have enabled you to do what you've done? Is there anything that stands out? You know, I'm sure as a humble guy, this might be a horrible question, but you know, is there anything you
Yeah,
think that you're like, oh, yeah, this is something that you know, you've kind of mentioned how you've been brought up and aspects of that. Is there anything that stands out to you that you think, oh, if I didn't have this thing, it would have made doing what I've done more challenging?
Hmm. My immediate reaction to that question, and you've really skewered me on that question, Tom, so congratulations there, is that I don't know what, you know, other people are better off telling me about what makes me tick. But I think actually, you know, I can think of some things. I think it's a natural bloody mindedness, determination. You know, what has been fueled by that? I think perhaps being the youngest of 3 children, you know, fighting for your voice to be heard. Um, I think it's about coming to care about things, you know, really deeply. That as a teenager, you know, I was sort of there and enjoying it. In my 20s, I was there and enjoying it, but actually have become so important to me and doing something about it. You know, as Edward Abbey said, sentiment without action is the ruin of the soul. don't just sit on, the sidelines and wish it was something different. Just get up and do something about it. And so I'm very action orientated. With that comes a huge amount of risk. And, I look at friends who've had, employment throughout their lives, looking forward to their pension and everything else like that. It's, part of me thinks, God, I wish I'd had that rather than the roller coaster I've had. But I've also had exceptional times as well as the challenges along the way. And it's because I've devoted more and more of myself to things that I deeply care about. And I'm going to come on to something else as well. But on this topic, why do I think rewilding is so important? Why do I think nature is so important? Is that I've always felt it's viscerally important to me, but I think society now recognizes that nature is not something that we just go and see at the weekends or we go on holidays to see. These are our life systems. And if we mess with our life systems, i.e. our ability to sequester carbon, so the best technology in the world we have in the world to sequester carbon are our ecosystems, our plants and our trees and so on, and our release of oxygen, regulation of the climate, regulation of temperatures, precipitation, and on and on and on. Why do we have a global initiative now of 30 by 30? 30% to protect 30% of our oceans and 30% of our land masses by 2030, just to set aside for nature. Because these are our life systems and we mess with them at our peril. And so we can't continue as we are. We've got to fix our relationship with our natural environment and with our climate. Otherwise, there is only one ending to this. This is what I profoundly believe in, and this is what the science says. So that's why I think it's important. That's what gets me up in the morning. You and I have children, and that comes clearly into view when you have kids. Mm. The other thing is, and it's something you and I have talked about, and I said I'd be as open as I could on this call, is loss. Is things don't always go according to plan in life. I lost my sister 23 years ago now. And, this is people lose family members. They lose their siblings, they lose their children. My mother lost her daughter. It sharply puts into focus what is really important in life. And that is a motivator for me to do justice to those good people around the world. And for those people out there who've suffered loss, and I think we all have to some extent, one way or another, is I've learnt to mobilize it as a power to commit myself to things I strongly believe in. That's my answer.
Thank you for being open and talking about hard things. I'm not going to go full Stephen Bartlett on it and push you on it, Duncan. But thank you for talking about it, because I think, like you say, it's a driver, it's a motivator. These things all play into it. I think when you talk about the stubbornness, that's like a really interesting recurring thing. I guess it ties back to the will to win thing, but there is something about doing difficult things that almost requires you to kind of put your fingers in your ears and ignore what anyone else might be saying or telling you to do, to just get your head down and, that where the line is between that and sort of putting your head in the sand, if it doesn't go the right way is a really hard line to tread. So yeah, it's always nice to hear, and for me and for anyone else who might be listening, to get some reassurance of that thing of like, yeah, while everyone else might be telling you to go left, it's all right to dig your heels in and
Absolutely.
and keep pushing.
Absolutely. Be innovative, be creative, be bold and brave. There are, and the outcome of that will be mixed. There will be
Yes.
greater challenges, there'll be greater rewards as well. And I know, Tom, I think you were on the cusp of another question, but just to round that out a little bit, because you also mentioned Stephen Bartlett. You and I both listen in on Stephen Bartlett, and I think he has some fascinating guests, and I can sort of pick out a number of things actually from some of those guests that we can perhaps come on to. But he had one of his most recent guests was talking about a curve of change that one will experience in a leadership position, perhaps in one's life. It's effectively the change curve. It's a curve that I know specifically for the past 20 odd years. And how it was presented to me was it was the emotional intricacies of being an entrepreneur. And it starts out with, I think, uninformed optimism. And the first part of the curve is you rise up, you then get into challenges and so on, and then it's a sharp sort of dive down as you kind of reach that crisis of meaning. It's like, oh my God, am I really on the right path here? And the bottom of that curve, the sort of the doubt, the crisis of meaning, I just wanted to add in there is that singular bloody mindedness could take you so far. But the thing that I was always taught is when you're going through tough times, do not be alone. Have people around you, have your support around you to enable you to get through those tough times, and keep persevering, if you like, because then you come through to back through to informed optimism and back to greater heights than you know you could have achieved. Because if you don't, what happens is, and this guy on the Bartlett podcast articulates it, is you go through that first phase of that loop constantly. Uninformed optimism, it's all great. Challenges, doesn't work out, and then you go, I'm going to bounce onto the next shiny thing. Great, it's giving me that rush of saying, no, what, that didn't work. So let's run off to this thing that I think will work. And it's a loop that you never get off. And I cannot express enough how important it is to show determination, perseverance, and have good people around you supporting you.
Who is that network for you? Is that family? Is it mentors? Is it, because I guess there's sometimes the people who are closest to you might not understand or know what that thing is. So I guess there's like blind cheerleaders, say, from the sideline saying, yes, go ahead, we support you. And then there's informed people who you might not be as close to, who have a bit of a perspective, a more logistical, scientific perspective that comes from experience. We're interested to know what that network actually looks like for you.
There are two sides to it, the personal and the professional. On the personal side, I'm blessed with having brilliant friends. And what I've learnt over the years is that if I turn up and I share a challenge, the best response I can receive is simply to be heard. Personally, if friends start giving me advice, doesn't really work. But those dear friends that will put up with me sharing my story, it's golden. It's golden. Because what is that mechanism? How does that mechanism help us? One, we're being heard. And as we say things out aloud, at least in my case, it helps me to begin to solve the problem. It's almost like the psychiatrist chair. It's someone who asks very few questions and you talk out loud, and actually you're beginning to problem solve yourself. So having dear friends that are good listeners is golden. On the other side, on the professional side, yes, I belong to a number of business networks that I have good fortune to have good relationships with, and therefore to be safe spaces, so I can go really deep on whether it's personal trauma or professional challenges and so on. And the main mechanism through that is, again, not for people to give advice back on your own current situation, is for professionals to share their own experiences that relate as closely as they possibly can to what you're what you're sharing with them. And sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, can you name check any of those networks that have been particularly good for you? Is there any that you've joined that you're like, yeah, this has been really useful?
Yeah, so one of the networks that I joined early on was the Entrepreneurs Organization, which was specifically for owner managers. And I think in those days, and it's probably more or less the same, you had to have a qualifying business that did at least £1 million, I think it was £1 million in turnover. That led me into another organization called YPO, where it was a higher threshold. I think the threshold now is something like $15 million to be a member of YPO. And my previous business was, so I remain a member of YPO. There are other networks I've joined, like Vistage, I think it's called, or I can't quite remember what it was. And there are other networks around the world. I would suggest, one of the other ones that's now called Helm was a London-based membership, which was known as a Supper Club, now called Helm. And they've been great. And I still have lifelong friends from that particular membership club for business people. I would highly recommend it. Find a really good peer-to-peer business network where there are really good guardrails established and protocols, because the safer you can feel in those and the deeper you can dive, the more you get out of it. Yeah. And you'll be a contributor to others as well.
Agreed. As a bit of a follow-on from that, you've already highlighted a few people and places, but I'm interested about where you get your inspiration from, what things you're listening to. You've mentioned podcasts. Like, is there anything else you would shine a light on as to where you go to get inspiration and ideas?
It's across the span of the emotion, the hard facts. We mentioned already, and this is sort of in a way quite tangential to both what you and I do. We've mentioned Stephen Bartlett's podcast series recently, and I've enjoyed the content in that because it is so diverse. And there are three that I've particularly enjoyed recently. The one that he had with Ray Dalio, which in a way is so far removed from our worlds. Here's the guy that set up the world's largest hedge fund company. Where's the commonality in that? But the key theme there was pain plus reflection equals progress. And so he has set up a series of principles and so on like that. So I really enjoyed that. The other one was with Matthew McConaughey that Stephen did. And one of the topics they talked about on the value of being dependent and dependable. So what do they mean by that? Is that we live in a world that has celebrated the individual, that has really encouraged us to go out and get it for ourselves. And that has led in many cases to being an unhappy place. And Stephen declares this on his on the podcast. He says, I've got friends in their late 30s who can do anything, do whatever they want at any time in the world. They're not in a relationship. They've got disposable income, whatever. He said they're some of the most miserable people I know. And I'm not just making that up. I think that's pretty much what he said. And so Matthew McConaughey and he talk about this, is that being dependent on others is fine. It's actually great. I rely on others for my world to work around me. And in turn, I am dependable to others. I have responsibilities and accountabilities to others. the good examples like the Amish communities and so on. It's like, how do 300 people lift a barn, or how do you lift a barn in a community? And there was a recent YouTube video of I think 200, 300 people lifting a barn because they do things together. We know that happy communities and being dependent and dependable on one another makes for happy, social, cohesive structures. So I find that an interesting kind of reminder as to the value of happiness and so on. The other one was with Jurgen Klopp, football manager, and I made some notes here for our call. Two things that I wrote down. What Klopp says: if you don't get the result you want, try again and try harder. He also said, I'm not here to get, I'm here to give. Because he talked about that whole thing of coming into Liverpool Football Club and just that total obsession, that total devotion to getting the results right. And out of giving over himself to others, they achieved massive success. So that's one of my resources. I would say that Ben Goldsmith's Rewilding the World podcast series is absolutely one of my go-to resources for me to learn about rewilding. Ben's doing a fantastic job there. He has fantastic speakers on it, like Chris Tompkins, and many others as well. I think they're up to 60, 70 episodes now. So that's a great resource for me. I try and keep abreast of contemporaneous news as well, which is not always a happy place to be, but just try and keep going with current affairs, what's going on in the world. If anything, it just redoubles my resolve to commit to what I do. I do try and sit down and read. The book that I'm reading at the moment is the new biography of Peter Matheson by Lance Richardson. And it's a story of the writer, the author, Peter Matheson, who wrote The Snow Leopard, and many other books about travel and natural history. So it's interesting, reading about how complex a character he was. I don't read enough fiction, which is not so good. And then it's what I listen to, what I watch, what I read, what I watch. I try and have a bit of bubblegum time as well, just to get that lift away from the intensity of the day. So, pretty rubbish TV series, something like that. Get the bubblegum in, take a break, make a reset.
It's easy to get a bit self-indulgent, isn't it, talking about these things? And I'm a big advocate for just watching some stupid comedy and taking yourself out of exactly. Alan Partridge will forever release me from the stresses of the day. Time's flying by, so I've still got about 50 questions I could ask you, Duncan, but I'm going to move it towards what I tend to ask people towards the end. If you were speaking to someone who was thinking about starting their own business in travel, tourism, hospitality, what would your advice or guidance be to them?
Dig deep on what it really means to you, and work on articulating that in an explicit manner, i.e., don't hold it in your head, write it down. And it starts with the personal. What does my world look like in 10 years' time? And then sharpen up on the head. What is it that we want to do? What is the offer here? Who are we doing it for? i.e., what is our customer group? Target market. I've heard, for example, and I won't name names, but a dear friend in travel. When he started it, young man, strong, adventure, he thought, what, a lot of other young, strong men would want to go out and do these adventurous trips. No, it's people who are in their 50s, who are empty nesters with disposable income, and often ladies. Brilliant, wonderful group to work with. Fantastic. So it's knowing the customer group. Secondly, and then I think thirdly is, what's the X factor? What's the extra value you're bringing to the party here? It's something that we always constantly have to work on. All of us. Travel is an incredibly busy space. What's the point of differentiation that is relevant and compelling, interesting, emotive? It's difficult. Those three things in themselves sound easy, but it's difficult, and they require constant time and constant investment to continue honing and improving what makes you stand out.
What does that 10-year view look like for you? I guess individually or as a business?
I think on the short term, we are wedded to the 2030 mission, so 5 years out, and I'm going to give you sort of that aspect right now. It is driven by impact targets. We have five aspects to it. One of those is commercial in terms of the income that we want to achieve with the business, but is around impact targets of aligning with the 30 by 30, raising a certain number of dollars for impact donations and investments, partnering with organizations that are protecting large landscape scale tracts of land and seas, and also building a community as well. Those are the five things is a really committed and vibrant and engaged community as well, because that's actually what we're about. Why do we exist, JWP? We exist to create a community of people who, through their travel experiences with us, can better understand how they can contribute and engage. That's it. So that's the 2030. The 2035, I would see a broader portfolio of offers and value that we bring under the JWP brand. And that would include advisory services. That would include perhaps even a dedicated impact investment fund. And that would include also a media portfolio as well. Because, I've articulated our target audience, but I strongly believe in the social equity, the social justice, reaching the broad audience. So how can we help tell these stories to everyone that finds this fascinating and wants to engage with it? And it comes back to the storytelling through audio, through film, through stills, finding those stories that we can share with others.
Fabulous. I like the sound of that. Is there anything else you would like to share in particular before I want to circle it back round to Ladakh and snow leopards, which you mentioned at the start? Is there anything else you would like to shine a light on or mention or talk about before we do that?
It's how important gratitude is. And I know we can say it and we know it's important, but being grateful for what one has rather than what one doesn't have is so important. It is so important. We all have in our lives things that we wished we had, we didn't have. It's not that important. It's about the quality of the relationships that we hold. I honestly believe that our physical state being well, our well-being is the sum of the parts of our positive relationships with ourselves, with those around us, and with our natural world. And that's what's important, and to be grateful for those and continue to invest on those, because we shouldn't take them for granted. We've got to continue to invest in those and be grateful. Yeah.
Like it. Tell us the full circle snow leopard Ladakh story.
Oh, goodness. So, as you know, here we are in January, and I was there last month in December in Ladakh in northern India. And this was really a journey of so many levels for me. So this was one of my formative experiences back in 1998. As an 18-year-old, I joined a small group led by a couple of young army officers, to do a sort of an outward bound expedition to Ladakh. And India was a very different place in some respects then, many respects then, and of course in others is still the same wonderful India. And we set out to explore and trek one of the remote valleys in Ladakh, the Zanskar Valley. And it was just amazing, amazing. Just a wonderful experience. And I found my old photo album last year, and sort of seeing those pictures, very bad pictures from that time, brought so much back to life. So it was, when I think about why are we doing this journey to go and explore and photograph snow leopards in Ladakh, it was really a return for me. It was also I think a tribute for how I'd been brought up. So we love working with families. We love intergenerational travel, where parents will go with grandparents and will go with children, because I think children are such brilliant sponges of these experiences. So I can't encourage people enough to travel with their families and get out and explore the world. So a gratitude for having had the privilege of having that experience in 1988 to give back. So we went out with a group of 12 of us in all. We had 9 guests, myself, world-class photographer Matthias Klum, and our local host, Bezad Larry. And we spent 10 days in Ladakh. And it was that wonderful composition of actually seeing snow leopards, seeing wolves, seeing lynx in a properly wild place. You know, going to East Africa is wild. And seeing lions and everything else is wild. That's a wild environment. But this it's so wild. You know, then these animals are not habituated. You are properly in the wild at altitude. It was also the wonderful exposure to the culture. I love mountain culture, adore mountain culture, and particularly the Himalayan mountain culture, because I've been back to the Himalayas over the years. I've been to Kashmir, I've been to Ladakh, I've been to Kumaon and Garhwal. I've been to Bhutan, I've been to Arunachal Pradesh in the east. And I just find them fascinating, the Tibetan Buddhist culture. It was almost also an opportunity for me to re-engage with a book I love, Peter Matheson's The Snow Leopard, a journey that is both of nature and of self. And it had all those composite parts to it. It was to me, it was a complete journey. We had a wonderful group of guests from an incredibly diverse set of backgrounds and geographies. And it was really the perfect example, the exemplar of what I believe good travel is about shared experiences, working towards a shared endeavor, contributing financially to the conservation NGO that's helping the work of the preservation of the snow leopards and other wild animals up there, and the coexistence with the local shepherds and people and so on. So it has everything to it. And it was a real tribute actually to how lucky I've been and how other people have shaped my life, particularly my mother and my sister and other friends and family. And what we can do to make a positive difference in the world. So I may have said it earlier, my great reward from all of what I do is I get to spend time with brilliant people around the world. And my debt to that privilege is to make sure that I do everything within my resources and my fiber to contribute to that positive environment that they support out there.
Thank you, Duncan, for that and for spending the time to talk through all your experience with us. And as I said at the start, I was very much looking forward to doing that, and it's more than fulfilled what I hoped it would be. So yeah, I appreciate you being so open. And what's been very interesting for me is maybe from the outside, when you look at the business and what you do, and obviously the focus on purpose and maybe those things that can be interpreted as being a bit soft and fluffy and all the nice things, the sort of foundational business side of things and stubbornness and will to win and grit and all those kind of elements that have given you the foundation to build all those things on top of. So yeah, thank you for coming and sharing it with us. And yeah, kudos. Like it's amazing to hear about it. You're a leading light and an inspiration for lots of people in the industry, and yeah, certainly for me since I've been following what you do. So I really appreciate you coming on,
Tom. I'm absolutely humbled and honoured. Thank you for inviting me. I really am. I think, my job is really not to tell the story of me. It's to tell the story of others, and expand it out to get people engaged. The other thing, this is so much fun. It is unbelievably good fun. And I think it's a richer, more fun way to experience the world as well. So if I may, I'm going to finish on a quote from one of my real heroes, Chris Tompkins. So if you don't mind, bear with me. I'm going to read this out because I can't hold it in the head.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is what Chris says. I hope that whoever sees this gets the message that these things don't happen on their own. Everybody has to get out of bed every day and do something meaningful that has nothing to do with themselves to protect those things you love. You have to jump into the fray. You have to really get serious about spending or investing a portion of your life doing something that sees you become an activist, a defender, raising an army to protect the natural world. You have to be inspired by people, but you also have to just want it on your own.
That sounds like the right way to go out. Where can we find you, Duncan? Where can we follow you and what you do, and keep up to date with Journeys with Purpose and the progress that you're making?
So thank you, Tom. So the very best way to find me is through the website, journeyswithpurpose.org, O-R-G. And on there, we have a lot of our impact partners. We have our blogs, like the recent one that I've done about our snow leopard trip. We have some film and a whole range of resources. And also, how you can travel with us as well. So journeyswithpurpose.org.
Fabulous. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you very much, Tom.
And that's a wrap. Season 3 is complete. Big thank you to Duncan for rounding off this season with an absolute corker. I'm sure you've taken a lot away from that. And I hope you've enjoyed listening to the rest of the episodes in the season and digging back into the archives to some of the previous episodes that we've done as well. I am already excited to go and start digging around planning for season 4. But if you want to access the resources and information around that episode and see the previous episodes that we've done, go to north9.agency. That's north9.agency/podcasts. And you can go and listen to the back catalogue while you're waiting for season 4 to get recorded. If you're a business in travel or hospitality looking for marketing support, drop us a line. We'd love to find out more about you, see if we can help in some shape or form. And you can also read more about our 100% initiative there, where we share the story about how we give all the profit we make from our work to educational charities and, aim to have a positive impact with the work we do with clients. As I say, that's us done now for season 3. I hope you've enjoyed it. We've spoken to some incredible people, inspirational people, a wide-ranging set of experiences and insight that we've taken from it, and I've had a absolutely fabulous time doing it and learning along the way. I hope you have too. If you know people you think we should speak to, go to the North 9 website, drop us an email and a message with any suggestions, and we look forward to seeing you back here for season 4. Thanks for now. Stay tuned for the next one, and in the meantime, stay safe, keep exploring, and happy travels.